I want to start today's class by looking at that case study that I sent through to you via WhatsApp earlier today, because I've realized that it's not on your Cole campus like I thought it would be. So I thought I would just send it through to you. Otherwise, you're going to be in the dark wondering what it is that you should be doing. So the whole first section, you'll see the first section will make a lot more sense for you now when you have this info, because they ask about things like your benefits that you can have, how do they approach it, and how can you make this work for community radio station. They have the methodologies in here. So RX Radio is the actual radio station, the Children's Hospital's radio station. So you read through this whole thing, you'll see they have your approaches there. The benefits, which is really important, which is one of the questions they ask on your assignment. Why children's radio? And then they give you the background about it, what it is that they do during COVID, what they strive to do, their sustainability, institutional sustainability. So important because remember, you need to look at it from a community radio station perspective as well. Like, how can we use something like this in other radio stations? So moving forward here, awards, training methodology that they've used, ongoing radio training, values and principles, ethical considerations, obviously, very important. And then issues and lessons learned. Okay, impact, dignity and respect. So you can just read through all of this. But you'll see now that technically it's going to be really easy to answer question 1. You just need to read through this thing. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is airtime. So selling and executing airtime, and then we're going to look at earned, owned, and paid media, which is the last section on your assignment. So last time we spoke about FABI. So we spoke about FABI meaning fun or funny, useful, bold, beautiful, or inspiring content. So that's the kind of content that we aim to deliver with every single content piece that we put out anywhere, technically, not only on air, but also on all other media spaces that we make use of, okay? Everything needs to be entertaining, it needs to be relatable and relative, okay? Needs to speak to you and me. So when we look at radio elements specifically, okay, blah, blah. This is just an introduction of what everything is and what we look at. When we look at generic advertising means spots. So Claire, you should know what this means. Daneo, actually, I think you will also. So we have generic advertising in the sense of back in the day, like 20 years ago, when we listened to radio, we would hear ads during specific periods set aside purely for advertising. So like spot breaks, even though we don't use the word break on air because it refers to TV, which means I'm taking a break. Okay, so we don't say it on air, but we still in radio talk about a spot break or a commercial break or a ad break. Any one of those 3 things means the same thing. Okay, 30-second pre-recorded advert. But obviously with the evolution of social media and with where we stand on our day-to-day basis, we have so much information floating around us and so little time to consume it all that if you're not talking to me anymore, but you're talking to an overall group, it'll go over my head, okay? I need you to speak to me. Why? Because my limbic system, where my decision-making is where my decision-making comes from, where I make my decisions, is also where my emotional side is. So you need to talk to me on an emotional level for me to actually fully comprehend what it is that you're trying to tell me or sell me, whatever it is. I always refer to story selling instead of storytelling, because you're selling me your story, not just telling me your story. You want me to go and do something about it instead of just walking away going, ah, that was a nice story, right? So anyway, back in the day, it wasn't like this. So we did generic advertising. We did spots and we did live reads. So we did a recorded version and we did a live version of ads. That was pretty much it. So that's what we had, aka generics or classic airtime as we refer to it now. So it can be 5 seconds, it can be 60 seconds, okay? They will all go into my show clock, aka this clock that I built, this hour clock with all my elements split into it, which has my songs in there, my talking links in there, my ad breaks or spot breaks in there, and any features that I might have. So a spot break is roughly around 3 to 3.5 minutes each. So there's space for about 7 spots. And when we start creating spots, things to remember that's really important are the 3 C's. So don't get confused. I'm going to show you 2 sets of 3 C's today. Okay. The one set of 3 C's has to do with the creativity around designing a 30-second pre-recorded spot. The other 3 C's has to do with owned media. So a 30-second spot always needs to deliver on the 3 C's, which are capture, curiosity, and convert. So I need to capture your attention, then gain your curiosity in order to convert you from a passive consumer into an active member of a brand community. It's not as easy as that, though. If it was as easy as that, people wouldn't be doing half as much advertising as they are, because it would mean that you will convert as a listener very quickly, or as from one brand to another very quickly. But we all know that's not the case, eh? Do you like the bank that you bank at?
It's okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah,
Right.
it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, it's okay. So I don't really like my bank currently, but even in saying that, I'm not going to switch. Why? Because it's such a schlep, and at this point, it's rather the devil you know than the one you don't for me. So I'm not happy with them, but it's not that I'm staying out of loyalty. It's that I'm staying because I'm too lazy to switch everything over. Nothing big enough has happened for me to go, okay, I really now need to switch, right? Because we do not actively make these big decisions about switching brands. Think about your favorite, I don't know, shoe brand. Why that specific one? Why not another one that's cheaper? Why would you invest in that brand? There's no logical reason for us, okay? We buy with our emotions and we justify it using logic. That's just the way it works. It's like, I just invested, I'm very happy, like this is a brand new computer in front of me because my other one was giving me a lot of issues. So I'm super happy with my nice new MacBook Pro. But from a logical point of view, there's no reason that I needed to buy this specific MacBook Pro with the M2 chip, okay? Yes, I could justify it using logic by saying I produce music, so it helps me. I edit videos, so it helps me. It's got great pixels, etc. But I could just as easily have gone out and bought an Android laptop with the same kind of specs, okay? Probably for a bit cheaper. So we buy emotionally and then we justify it using logic. Why am I telling you that? Because it's really important to understand that before. Okay. Hi, Nyaniso. It looks like you're from, I don't know, someone else's, your kid's computer, someone who's at Kiro. Anyway, so it's easy for us. I'm telling you this because it's easy for us to say.
Yes,
sorry,
man, Sharita. I had my son logged in
from on a Churro account. So does it show that my profile is Churro now?
It's fine. I knew it was you. It was just
Okay.
interesting to see Kiro Learner there.
Cool. Okay.
So anyway, like I was saying, it's easy for us to say the theoretical side of this. It's easy to say that when you create a 30-second spot, it needs to capture a listener's attention, arouse curiosity, and to be able to convert them from a passive consumer into an active member of that brand community. It's not that easy to do in real life, okay? And an ad on its own is not going to do this for you. You need it to be point of, you need to drive awareness for this ad. So brand awareness is really important, and consistency is really important, and it goes hand in hand with this. Even if you create the most creative ad, you need it to flight a certain number of times in order for us to actively start getting the message across. Okay. Another great example that I have is that think about Coca-Cola and then think about Pepsi. So Coca-Cola has Coca-Cola Light or no sugar, and then Pepsi has Pepsi Max. And this thing has done a taste challenge over the years across the world. And every single time they do a blind taste challenge, Pepsi Max comes out above Coca-Cola. Yet people buy Coca-Cola and not Pepsi. Why? Because Coca-Cola is so ingrained in our minds that we tend to forget that Pepsi even exists. And Coke has done so much guerrilla marketing that we understand what the brand is completely. Whereas for Pepsi to get to that same level, not just will it have to start like doing these spikes in advertising. The only reason I'm thinking about it now is because I'm currently doing an advertising campaign for Pepsi. But also they need to afterwards consistently drive a message. So they need to be top of mind for our consumers, which means consistently doing generic advertising throughout, giving people 6 months worth of Pepsi to drink at home, to give to other people in order to start infiltrating your consumer mindset. Okay, it's not something that happens overnight when it comes to promotions. So we need to realize that as well. So a good radio spot is also a lot like a story. It needs to have a strong intro to draw your audience in, an interesting middle section that tells them why to care and offers relevance to them, and then a meaningful end that encourages them to act on the message shared. I'm sure I've played you the, was it the Energade or Lucrozade ad? That was a spot, but it was a storytelling spot, which was relatable. Okay, so creativity really important in terms of capturing your attention, arousing your curiosity, and then converting you into an active member of the brand community. We're going to talk about that later when we talk about owned media as well. So when it comes to mass media, aka traditional media, aka TV, radio, print, we talk about reach and we talk about high reach, high numbers. Because that's what we want. That's why we go to these specific mediums. And a great radio advert is worthless without an audience, right? Any great piece of content is worthless if there isn't an audience to hear it. This is where media planning and implementation comes in. And these are equally important to the success of a generic advert placement. I can place 3 spots. Sure. Doesn't mean it's going to make any difference. Okay. So we look at the brand's desired audience along with the radio station itself's audience. We break it down, and then we look at the specific target market. Then we look at the best times and time channels and environments in which the message needs to be shared, because different stations, different nuances, different languages, different cultures. It's all these things we need to keep in mind when doing a campaign. So reach, unfortunately, is exceptionally important in today's day-to-day, because we want to make sure that we reach as many people as possible for a campaign, right? It's not just about how many people we can impact. We actually need to show that we've reached X amount of people overall. So we want to connect with as many listeners as possible. That's the only way I can ensure that my message is actually being widespread, like that everyone is hearing my message. So radio specifically is referred to as a frequency medium because of how easily ads can be bought and how effective they can be. They're also very cost effective against a TV commercial, okay? Also a lot easier to put together and a lot quicker to put together and get out on air. So this means that advertisers can flight their spots, aka play their ads several times a day to make sure that listeners hear and take in said message. So what is the golden rule? How many times do you need to hear something to actually take it in?
7.
7.
Yeah, that's my answer.
7. Okay. So I'm asking this also because there are different takes on this. There's a study that says 7. There's a study, though, that says when it comes to radio advertising, I just need to make sure you hear it a minimum times of 3. But how do I make sure that you hear it a minimum times of 3?
Time slots or like peak times, I guess.
Okay.
Danae will help me.
I scheduled 21 ads in 7 days. That's a lot. It's a lot of generic ads. So 21 ads in 7 days is like the golden ratio, what we try to do, because then you get to that number 3. Okay, anything above that is awesome. Anything below that, not so great. So in doing that, obviously across the board, utilizing different time channels, I make sure that you can actually hear this message and actively take it in. Okay. So in this way, in doing things this way, I ensure that you actually hear this message and take it in. And remember, so when I say 21 times or 21 spots, this is when I'm just talking about generics. We do take in account anything else. If we're running a competition, we take into account all the elements there. Or if we're doing power spots or anything else, because those things are high value for us, high impact. Okay, but overall, 21 spots per week. So context. Remember, content is king, but context is queen. Context is really important, goes hand in hand with your content. So once you have your message and you've decided on a way to maximize your audience reach, so how is it that you can reach the biggest audience possible, you need to consider how your message will be received. What are the nuances, once again, behind it? Context is really underrated in creation of generic advertising. People forget that it's not just about your content that you use. You need to remember that different people, you have different mindsets. You think differently. You're in different places at this point even. Like there's a lot of different things going on that you need to take into consideration. So context is also important. The mindset of your audience, along with the environment of your show and the creative messaging of the advert, must all work together to ensure optimal impact at the end of the day. Okay, before we can say we have a great 30-second ad. So this is spots. Okay, then we get live reads. What's the difference between a spot and a live read? The one is live, the other one is pre-recorded with some musical elements or effects, etc. added to it. The one can have more words, the one that's a live read, the one that's a pre-recorded ad can't have as many words because I'm adding music and effects and things to it. So a live read also contains a brand message. It's also scripted and paid for by the advertiser. It also attempts to influence a listener's feelings about the brand. But the biggest difference is that this live read is live. It's not recorded, but it's read out by the presenter during said commercial break. Again, do not use the word break in radio ever. Leave that for TV. What we tend to do is we'd put it top or tail. Okay, so beginning of the ad break or the end of the ad break. Why? Because when you don't simply go into ads, okay, there will be talking before ads. So a live read also counts as talking before ads. And with ads, I mean pre-recorded 30-second generics, for instance, okay? At the end again, talking before music. So we do it at the beginning or the end. So live reads give this perception of a personal endorsement without me actually having to pay an endorsement fee, right? We're going to chat about a power spot, but if I place a power spot on radio, not only is that power spot expensive, but I have to pay the endorsement fees for the actual presenters who are endorsing this product on air. So whatever the fee is, like, I don't actually want to tell you how much I paid out this morning for influencers, for endorsement rates. But anyway, it can go anywhere from, we're talking commercial radio, so from 10,000 to 60,000, right, for endorsement fees on top of a power spot fee. So live read gives you this perception of a personal endorsement without you having to pay the endorsement fee, but you do have to pay what we refer to as a loading fee. So you do pay it extra for it. And it's normally 50% loading fee. So 50% of what a 30-second spot will cost you on top of. So in essence, you're paying 150% of the rate. So by a presenter reading the live read, it provides you with this level of credibility for the brand, okay, which hopefully gets then across to the listener. So live reads are more expensive, like I just said, than generic ads, and we call this a loading fee because of this perception that the presenter is lending their voice to your product, okay? So it seems like I am endorsing said product, even though I'm not, okay? So if you buy 5 live reads, it'll cost you more than 5 30-second spots. Also, we're bargaining on your relationship with the listeners. So to get our message across, we're using you in essence as a presenter because we know that people will listen when you talk, which makes it more valuable and therefore more expensive. So for instance, if a spot costs 100 Rand, a live read will cost 150 Rand. Okay, it's more like if, in the case of if a spot costs 10,000 Rand, a live read will cost 15,000 Rand, but you get the gist. So live reads can exist on air for longer periods of time, but the messages need to change frequently so that listeners can stay interested in what you are saying. So we don't repeat the same message over and over, but also stations tend to ask that you don't give them more than 3 scripts when you do have different ones at once. But anyway, so don't repeat the same message over and over because a listener will become bored at a point and stop listening if you are too repetitive, okay? So consider what message you want the audience to walk away with after they've heard your advert and find a variety of different ways to deliver this message, okay? So we normally include easy to use specific contact info like perhaps a telephone number or an email address or web address or social media handle. Don't overwhelm your listener. Remember, we live in a world where if you are really curious and you really want more information, guess what? You will pick up your phone and you will Google. You will find the information that you need in like 5 seconds on your phone, right? So we don't have to give you all the nitty-gritty information. We only need to give you enough to hook you and to get you to buy into us. Then you'll do the rest yourself. think about it. If you really like something or you see something that piques your interest, don't you pick up your phone and you Google it to find out more yourself?
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. So I don't have to put in visit www.blah, blah, blah now, because you will go and find that yourself if you're really interested. Okay. And then you will reach out. So live reads, like I said, carry a loading fee. We say usually because for some reason, it's like community radio stations haven't caught on to this whole thing about the 50% extra loading fee. Not that I'm complaining, but majority of them don't charge you more for a live read, okay, unless they're a bigger community radio station. But when it comes to commercial radio stations, you can betcha they all charge you 50% loading fee. So this is because they sound like they're part of a show. A live read sounds like it seamlessly forms part of your show, rather than it being a separate ad break. And so listeners are more likely to engage with them, okay? Makes it more valuable. Furthermore, and this is quite important, premium pricing discourages advertisers from buying these ads as frequently as they would be buying commercial spots, conventional spots rather. So we rather want you to buy 30-second spots instead of buying so many live reads. Why? Because I still need to maintain my professional or my programmatic integrity on the radio station. So I don't want you to buy out every single live read spot that there is, okay? So the whole idea is that live reads should be used correctly and not be exploited by advertisers just because of the fact that they are read live on air, and because we know that listeners will most likely lend their ear and listen to what you have to say when it is read out by a presenter rather than just a 30-second spot. Okay. So when do we use said live reads? Majority of the time, when something requires an immediate action or in some sense of an urgency, when communicating a change or update of known information, for public service announcements, for emergencies, for offers that are available for a limited time period, and if the live read has a particular interest in or relevance to the product. So this creates a greater sense of personal attachment to the message. Also, there's been times before where we've had to pull an ad from the air because it did not adhere to everything that the Broadcasting Act states. So if you go and read the Broadcasting Act in detail, as much as we've spoken about it, obviously we didn't go through this thing word for word and in detail, but one of the points mentioned is that you have to mention the SMS rate, the rates of these fees. So SMSs cost R1.50, for instance, if it's the SABC, and you have to mention T's and C's apply. If you don't mention those two things, there are people that are always sitting and listening to adverts that are flighting, so kind of like an audit to make sure that the correct stuff flights. And if you're not doing that, you can get into a lot of trouble. So the one ad that we didn't create, there was a creative company, and I'm not going to mention them now, anyway, created, did not say SMSs cost R1.50, and it is our bad, we didn't pick it up. So this thing started running, and 2 days into running, I get this phone call from this woman that works for this specific entity going, let's just say she wasn't the nicest woman, telling me about the fact that we are flighting this thing that doesn't say this. Can I tell you, in 10 minutes, this thing was flighting on 6 stations. In 10 minutes, we had that specific ad removed from 6 radio stations, and about another 10 minutes later, we had a live read scripted in its place that we had scheduled on, say, 6 radio stations that had all the correct details in it. Okay, so you learn very quickly there's certain things like you don't mess with anything that falls under the Constitution, aka the Broadcasting Act is one of them. So if ever you're in a space where you need to make sure or help write ads or whatever it is, always remember to add how much it costs if it's a competition and they need to SMS things through. Always have your T's and C's somewhere up, and always make sure that it says T's and C's, right? Those things are very important. Also, sometimes the client might not have a production team to record a 30-second advert. So then what we do is we would write a copy that we would send to the client to approve, and then we'd send that to the station, because we have copywriters who can write these things. So then it's easier for us and quicker to write a live read than to find a voice, get the correct music nuances, make sure that there's that you legally are allowed to use said music, have the correct rights bought for it, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So then it's just easier to write a live read, okay, depending on how much time you have. But you need to consider there's a margin of error when it comes to live reads, because we are people, okay? People don't always read things off air before they go on air, so the mistakes can be made. And I know of a lot of very bad mistakes that people have made with live reads, okay? Some that have cost them money, others that luckily for them have not, and these things could have gotten them in a lot of trouble. They're just lucky that the correct, or that no one heard them, that reported them to any entities. Okay, so stations do ask for scripts in advance to give presenters time to rehearse and to establish a tone and a manner of presenting this thing, that it feels natural for them and consistent with the station's brand also. So reading through it obviously helps you with making less mistakes, less errors. Doesn't mean everyone does it, okay? A lot of people love winging things. But I'm not a fan of winging it. I'm a firm believer that whenever I have a campaign, I make sure people read the stuff beforehand. It doesn't matter who the presenters are. Okay. We get them, we sit with them actually, like we have a one-on-one like this with the presenters to make sure that they are aware of what they are doing at all times on air. So the shorter the spot is, obviously, the shorter the script needs to be. An average 30-second live read would be about 90 words max, okay. If it's vernac or any other language than English, you know that it has to be less. So you're probably looking at around 80 words, maybe 75, okay, to 80 words, because it's longer words. So in English, we push for 90, and it also depends on how quickly someone's speaking. Some people will even tell you it's less. It's like some people will say it's 80 words, but on average, it's actually 90 words. Obviously, if you record it, it will be less, because then you need to factor in effects and you need to factor in music, etc. So that was a spot and a live read. Then we get to what we call a sponsorship and a branded, or rather sponsorships and branded content. Before I show you that slide though, I want to find out if you know what the difference is between branded content and a sponsorship. Any takers?
Are sponsorships like, oh, Danae, you go.
No, it's okay, but we can go.
Sponsorships like Outsurance, for example, because they do a lot of sponsoring of things, prizes and stuff like that. So would that be a sponsorship?
Okay, so let's take this. This is hand sanitizer, okay? Not that I want to show you, but so let's say this is a hand sanitizer. So I bought this bottle, hand sanitizer, right? Now I bought it, but I want to put my brand on it. So now I take my logo and I stick it on here, and now it says multi-choice on here, Okay, so now it no longer says where it came from. Now it's multi-choices, hand sanitizer. So in essence, I don't know if that makes sense. So I buy this from whoever it is, and I put my name to this thing. So now it's mine. That's in essence a sponsorship. So if I buy a bottle water from Aquel, and I remove Aquel's label and I put on Hotel Sharita on there, stick that on there, then it's now Hotel Sharita water, right? That's what I'm doing with a sponsorship. I'm taking something that already exists and putting my name to it. So then I'm making it mine. So for instance, there is this top 40. We know a top 40 happens on Saturdays. Great. Now I put my name to it, and now it's the Coca-Cola top 40. Awesome. Next year, it's the iTunes top 40. Great. Okay. Sponsorship means I'm putting my name to your brand so that I become the hero of this thing. It looks like without me, this piece of content will not be taking place. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And just a question. So would this then be the same for like Claire just made an example with Outsurance. So they sponsor a lot of like traffics or
Yeah.
business reports and
Yes.
stuff like that. So that would be in essence the same thing.
Yes. So we're going to talk about mandatory and non-mandatory indicators now. And you'll see under there, we get features on the one hand, and on the other hand, we get things like your mandatory indicators, which are like your news and your sport and your traffic and your weather. Okay, so yes, that is correct. That's also why, if you were wondering why it is that we still have traffic and why a program manager would never, or rather why a station manager would never remove it. Guess what? Because we make money out of it. People love sponsoring the traffic. So it brings in cash. So what then is branded content?
So branded content would be, for example, let's say SAA. So normally they run, it's part of a digital campaign. So they will run probably, I don't know, let's say they sponsor like I'll make an example with my station. So we'll have what we call In Conversations With, right? And then part of that package will then come with a branded content article. So where we then, so the digital copywriter will then write whatever content was on air, translated to an online copy with obviously the client's taglines and client's messaging to show that it's a sponsored piece of content.
Okay. So I'm glad you mentioned it like that. The biggest difference between a sponsorship and branded content is that branded content means co-created by the brand. Sponsorship means I'm simply putting my name to it. Branded content means I'm coming up with content while working with a brand. So it's not purely the radio station's content. Okay, so it's content that is similar to a power spot in a sense, except that it doesn't need to have an endorsement. It's just content that we come up with together, co-creators of content, versus a sponsorship, which is way easier because all I do is stick your name to it. Okay, so you mentioned the article. Sorry, you work for Prime Media, hey?
Yes.
Okay, I remember that because I'm doing a campaign with stations currently that one of your things include a branded content article. So when you said, I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Okay.
So branded content does not mean just digital. Branded content is on air, it's digital, it's anywhere I want it to be. Okay. Like what we do as a company is we do a lot of creative content. So pretty much 80% of what we come up with is branded content. So I tell you, this is what we're going to be doing on air. So whatever you would have done is taken away, and we, in this place, we co-create content together, okay, for us to place it. Obviously, way more expensive than a sponsorship because way more effort needs to go into making it work than there is for making a normal sponsorship work, okay? So sponsorship and branded content, it depends on how much the brand is responsible for the content creation. So in a sponsorship, all we're doing is we're linking the brand to content that already exists. It's there. I'm just putting my name on it, like I'm just putting my sticker on a bottle. Branded content is content that we create from scratch for a specific campaign with a set duration. So sponsorships are way more affordable, okay, because the content is already being produced. Like in your case, some radio stations want you to kind of try and work it in, like a sponsorship, and then they add branded content. Doesn't mean I'm actually sponsoring anything. Could just mean that's the way that you're mentioning it, okay? Unless you're saying something is brought to you by or is sponsored by or blah, blah, blah. But branded content, on the other hand, requires more people, creative development and production to be involved in creating and producing the content, as well as to be able to deliver said content. So we know that radio stations, what is this? What do we sell? We sell content, right? That's it. We sell content. We sell airtime. Content varies from long form content, long form meaning longer pieces of content, to daily topics or weekly topics and features, okay? Features and benchmarks. So topics and features are normally time stamped. We know this thing is going to happen at this day, at this time, and it won't change. That is the time that this thing will be happening every single day or once a week, whatever it is, because we try to create what we refer to as appointment listening. I make an appointment to listen to this thing at this specific time, okay? So that's quite important for us. So this type of content works really well for advertisers because I can align myself to your brand objectives that are already existing. It's already there. I already know this is a fun type of content piece, or this is a serious content piece, okay? And I already know you have an audience for this thing. So there's well-received content that has a guaranteed audience. It's good for my name to be attached to this thing if my values are the same as yours. So it's also associated, their brand with that particular content's theme or position. So buying into these existing content offerings is what we refer to as sponsorships, okay? And we break it down into two types of categories. The first one being mandatory indicators, and then we have features. So mandatory indicators, we mentioned earlier, they are news, traffic, sport, weather, financial indicators, okay? Like this traffic was brought to you by Outsurance, okay? That's like sponsorship. So these content pieces play an important role in the station's programming and the content of each show. So brands can tap into any or all of these elements for sponsorship. This entails a brand enclosing the content as provided by the radio station for their own messaging. Hence why I keep referring to like stickers on a bottle, because I enclose the content with my messaging, my brand messaging. So like I said, taking an existing product, pasting a different brand over its packaging so that consumers associate that brand with the product. So if you hear that this traffic bulletin is sponsored by Outsurance enough times, after a while, you are going to start thinking about this traffic and Outsurance together, aligned, okay? So the key for radio sponsorship is to do it in such a way that it sounds enticing and relevant to the listener in a short amount of time. So what does it normally look like, the structure? So it normally looks like this. There's normally a 10-second opening billboard or OBB and a 10-second closing billboard or CBB, followed by a 30-second generic spot or a live read. So an opening billboard and a closing billboard can be read by the presenter. So normally at the start and at the end of the indicator, or we can, like I said, have a pre-recorded piece play at the beginning and at the end. And then the 30-second spot or live read, which will tell me more about your brand message. This is similar to a competition. Competition will also have a similar structure. So an OBB, a CBB, and a 30-second generic spot or live read with your competition moment in between. Okay. So billboards indicate the brand's affirmation to the sponsored material and tell me as a listener that the content that you are about to hear or that you have just heard was delivered to them. Thank you to this hero of a brand who is paying for this thing. Okay. So the brand always is aligned as a hero. That's what it is. This creates an association with the brand that can improve recognition, credibility, and trust, which is what is so important for us. So this is mandatory indicators. Then we get our features. So a feature could be a benchmark. Doesn't have to be a benchmark, could be a benchmark. What is a benchmark? Do you remember our series of 1? No idea. What is a benchmark? All right, I'll tell you. So a benchmark refers to the series of 1, which is one thing every quarter hour that commands the listener's attention, one thing every hour that causes a definite emotive response, one thing per day that is like a did you hear this moment, like so something I can share with family or friends, okay? Then one thing every 3 months that people will remember your show by, and then lastly, one thing every year that makes your show legendary. Those are your benchmarks, okay? That is what every show should strive towards, is those 5 things. Normally, our features would be a benchmark because we would create a feature to fall into one of these things, okay? We don't just create a feature because we feel like it. We create a feature because we need a standout factor. We need something that can stand, that's strong enough to stand on its own, that people will listen in for. Hence why I'm saying it could be a feature. So listeners know what sort of content to expect at a particular time and anticipate this content. So appointment listening, I make an appointment to listen to this specific content piece. Features can be accompanied by a jingle or some sort of introductory piece that tells me that this is going to start happening now. From an advertiser's perspective, features created by the show or the station offer much more interaction between the audience and the brand, because I know people tune in for this thing. I know people are listening. People will engage, okay? So here there's room for listener suggestions via calls or social media, and that in itself is invaluable. Why? Because the content here is being co-created by the audience, all right? At the same time that it's being created for the audience. So we are forming co-creators, which in media is the strongest type of content you can find. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you can form co-creative or co-creator content in your owned media space, you're gold, literally, okay? So features have become key commodities for brands as they're viewed as a direct line of communication with my listener. I know that my listener will be listening again. Sponsorships of features must be treated very carefully and creatively, and there needs to be an alignment between the content in the feature and the brand sponsoring it. I can't have a really fun feature and have like F&B sponsor it, for instance. They have to seamlessly seem like they fit together, okay? So there needs to be a natural alignment so that the commercial message seems less blatant, meaning that the listener may be more open to it, okay? So a brand has a plan and needs to commit to a long-term sponsorship. A sponsorship is not a once-off. You can't sponsor something once and then carry on because firstly, it's fickle. It's difficult to build trust. Also, a sponsorship, like even if you sponsor something for a week, it's not enough to create an impact. So we did a sponsorship on Radio 2000 over a 12-week period. And by the end of that period, when that sponsorship was ending, the station was scrambling because they weren't sure what to put there now, because over this 12-week period, we could see how this feature grew week by week to the point where it was that appointment listening that we wanted it to be, okay? People really wanted that content. We had live artists in, but it was about how we did it. And we did it in the drive show, so peak time. So now you're sitting with this thing about what are you doing now in this thing's place. So radio stations prefer that you buy this for a longer period of time, anything from about 6 weeks to a year, right? Because once again, we are aligning as brands, firstly, and secondly, I need something else when you're gone if this thing isn't going to happen the same way anymore. Or we need to continue it, but then without money, obviously. So features will have a minimum sponsorship time because otherwise you're wasting your money and the radio station's time. Okay, if you're doing it, for instance, for a week, because you won't have any impact. So we also add this time limit thing to it, saying that you need to do at least so many weeks, like I just said, so that you're not perceived as being fickle and disloyal to sponsors. And it ensures that sponsors will commit to a set period of time, and also that I don't do something for 3 weeks and then my competitor comes in and does it for the next 3 weeks, for instance, okay? So it also assists the brand who will be sponsoring the feature in embedding itself in the audience's mind, which is exactly what we're trying to do, and building on that association, which takes time, okay? People don't like change. When change comes in, it takes us a while to get used to said change, and then a while longer for said change to settle and then to start being top of mind. So it takes time. Sponsorships can be multidimensional. Some radio stations have branded web pages, like you mentioned, the digital side of it, where all feature content is saved in the form of podcasts, where listeners can find it if they miss the show live. Depending on the feature, it's possible to add an off-air event, which listeners can attend to experience the content in person. And the integration of different media elements can be used together to enhance the overall impact of the campaign for the advertisers and the listeners. Like, for instance, at the end of this 12-week music experience campaign, we ran 2 weeks of ticket giveaways for an event which we held in Joburg, where you could win VIP or general access tickets, where majority of the artists that we had lined up on a weekly basis played at a concert, okay, a live concert, to kind of end this thing off with. So that is a sponsorship of the mandatory indicators and then features. Now we look at branded content. So brands are now looking more and more to co-create content so that they are more involved in shaping the narrative. Like I've told you, I myself, with our company, it's not often that we will buy into something that already exists. So we won't often only sponsor something or only place ads, okay? Because we understand this industry and we understand what works and what doesn't work. So we want to narrate the content. We want to make sure that the correct story is being told, that we have that emotional impact that we want to get out of the content at the end of the day. So we do branded content, okay? Bespoke, usually created by the radio station in partnership with the client and the creative or media agencies. A lot of stations are pushing back against things like this because they don't want you coming in and creating too many content pieces. But they do allow it, okay? You can buy it. It just is more expensive at the end of the day. So in this way, they can deliver their marketing message more effectively as a brand and sustain listenership at the same time. So simply put, branded content allows brands to create stories that are compelling and intertwined with the message they are telling. So brands will often look to house this kind of content on a radio station, like the platform, due to the wide reach that radio stations have and the specific audience that they are trying to target. It's important to consider when you're generating the branded content from a campaign. You have to have a very clear brief. You have to think about how to deliver the narrative. Because at the end of the day, the reason why you will do branded content and the reason why there are companies that do this kind of stuff is to create that golden thread. Have you ever heard of the golden thread?
No.
No, I don't think I have.
Okay. So let's say you're doing a campaign and there's PR involved, there's digital involved, there's creative involved, there's above the line, there's below the line, there's through the line, okay? There's everyone. They all have whatever they need to be doing, which is all their different elements. We need one golden thread to pull this whole overall campaign together. And that is one message that has to pull through all the elements in order for this whole message at the end of the day to be aligned, okay? Any campaign that we do with all these different people involved, there's one person, luckily it's not me, but it's someone that works with me, whose work it is, whose job it is to find the golden thread, to write the narrative by using the deliverables, by using the brief, by using the information that he's given, and by using the timeline, etc., to come up with the golden thread that at the end of the day pulls every single element in this campaign together as a whole. Why is this important? Because that's how you make a success of a campaign at the end of the day. That's how you get it from paid media to paid and owned media to get you to earned media. It's by having one overall key message. And that's not a key message as in they're telling me the key message is that we're driving to sell this element. That's not a golden thread. Okay. So it's not that easy to connect the dots, if it were, okay, to find the golden thread. But I cannot stress to you enough the importance of having a golden thread throughout any campaign that you run in marketing. Like it's really an important element that we have. So in essence, what it comes down to, if I were to put it for you, like just a little bit easier, is it's literally coming up with a strategy and imagining there's this very strong thread threading through all the different elements that connects what you're doing on all the different platforms to what you're trying to create at the end of the day. Right. So that's in essence the golden thread. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. So would for example, would campaigns like K-Day or 947 Joburg Day be something that would require a golden thread, or would some elements of the golden thread be then obviously not be implemented because it doesn't necessarily require or need any of those elements? Or would this be I don't know, is it like a campaign that sits on various platforms? So this would be TV, radio, social media,
Yes.
print, billboards, and all of that. So just one campaign that sits on various platforms.
But
Gotcha.
a campaign like K-Day is a brand. So you have the golden thread there. The golden thread is the experience.
Got you.
Okay, so you don't need to come up with one because it's established. Remember, this is now branded content. It's new content that we're coming up.
Oh, I see. Okay. So golden thread is something that's new that you have to come up with for a client.
If you're coming up with branded content, if they want something that you don't currently have, that speaks to them, but they give you.
So sort of like a bespoke.
It's completely.
Okay.
That's the whole thing, is that this is a bespoke campaign.
Okay.
So what happens then is that the digital guys say, okay, cool, we're going to be doing this on TikTok to get our reach numbers there. We're going to be, and the PR people tell you we're going to be doing this in terms of PR to make sure the word gets out there. Above the line says, cool, from a radio perspective, we want to do this, and we want to do these digital billboards. And out of home, and above the line, we're going to have it on TV. And then out of home is like, okay, cool, we're going to do this event. Then you need to see, okay, great, it's all good and well. Everyone has their own objectives, but how do we pull this thing together as one message overall? So how do you thread through this whole campaign to give you the message, to link it all together? So see, you can also see it as links. How do you link everything together? Okay. But no, if you, something like K-Day and that kind of stuff has been around for a number of years. It's the same as like Ultrafest. We know what it is. We know we can start selling tickets at tier 1 because we know that it's set in stone. It's a brand that happens year in, year out. And we know what to expect. So if I'm a fan, I'm going to buy tickets, regardless of whether I know what the lineup is or not. And then we get the second and the third tiers. So that's like that we handle from a brand marketing perspective and awareness point of view more. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this example on page 3 through 8. What is it even? Let's just see. Oh, no. Yeah, you can read through this whole thing if you want. It's just to give you an idea of branded content, but in essence, I've explained to you now pretty much how it works. And I'm pretty sure this is Ultimate Media who came up with this, who is my competitor, so it's quite interesting. Okay. Then you do get interviews. And when it comes to interviews, you get 2 types of interviews. You get programming interviews and you get advertisement interviews. So programming interviews are interviews that I want on the station from a programming perspective because it will add value to my radio station. Interviews from a sales perspective is something that is on a campaign basis. It's not to say that it has to happen, okay? It depends on the station, and a commercial radio station will never sell you an interview on its own without a campaign, ever. Okay, it has to form part of a campaign for them to sell it to you, hence why it's also not on a rate card. So interviews allow listeners to participate in seemingly personal conversations, and they're often conducted based on relevance, popularity, newsworthiness of the person being interviewed, have to be pre-approved by program managers. And here you will have to work with both sales and programming when you're doing an interview, because an interview as part of a campaign will normally be used either to launch this thing, to convey necessary information to said public, or to explain a partnership between the radio station and the brand, okay? Or they use it at the end to highlight the work that was achieved and to thank the audience. So there's a reason for us to have an interview. We don't simply have an interview for the sake of having an interview, because I've heard so many interviews that are super boring. And that's not the idea, okay? The idea is to conduct an interview in such a way that it's interesting, engaging, that you learn something. Like when we did the campaign, we bought 25 minutes of airtime in every segment, and that gave us pretty much the hour. Okay, so we bought an hour in essence, but all it was is in essence an hour's worth of an interview with an artist, because we were telling stories. So we were finding those stories and telling those stories while making sure that the campaign message came across. Okay, so we made sure that it's interesting enough from a programmatic point of view that listeners won't tune out. Which is also why we're so scared of simply saying yes for an interview, because you would know majority of interviews can be super boring. Have you ever heard of, like, not a political interview on, like, for instance, a talk radio station, but on any other station? They are boring, okay, because people don't put enough effort into making them work. And that's unfortunately the case, and that you can quote me on. So while a client may view an interview as an excellent piece of PR work for them, this is only the case if your information actually impacts the intended audience. Otherwise, it's a write-off. You just threw money away in the water. Bye. There are key pointers that clients have to consider when agreeing to an interview. Firstly, who is your audience? Who are you talking to? Okay. Will they care? Why will they care? So it has to be relevant. You have to use suitable language. You can't use slang on a radio station that people over 50 listen to, and vice versa. You can't have someone very stiff and formal on a radio station that's made for the youth. Give examples to explain. Don't simply explain, okay? Don't just give me the theory. What do we better understand? Me explaining a theory to you, or me actually giving you an example of something I've been through?
Explaining. I think it's much better when people use lived experiences, because it's you are able to explain it in such a way that I'm also able to imagine myself in that situation.
100%. It makes it way more relatable, because I'm not just theorizing it for you. I am giving you my personal experiences, which have a emotional component to it, making me vulnerable, making you and I form a connection, because you can relate, or maybe not relate to everything, but you can at least empathize the situation. You can see the situation. So it works way better if you don't get, I don't know, someone from the theoretical side in to explain it to you, but you get someone who's been through it, who's lived it, to explain it to you. Okay. Which is why I don't always like simply talking about theories and things with you, because it's so easy to sit here and to go, yeah, this is what you need, this is what you need, this is what you need, until you have to take those elements and put it into working. And then you sit there going, how now do I take all of these things and make it work? Okay, that's why you need actual examples of things, and which is why we work it into interviews also. Then you need to understand what your message is. Brief and clear. You need to be succinct. Okay, so short and concise, to the point. You need to get to the why first. There's a reason why Apple doesn't need to advertise so much, and why it's been the leading brand for forever, like since whatever, the 80s. Because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So we sell you the why before we sell you the what. Okay? Tell me the message first. Like, why do I need to buy into this thing from an emotional point of view so that I can logically look at it later? Don't start with logic. Our brains don't work that way. Okay. Get the listener to feel that connection. Focus on how the listener should feel about the brand. Everything is about feelings. Very, very psychology driven here. Consider how to make them feel that way. Don't just rely on the brand's existing reputation, okay? Be open to difficult questions. You always need to look at a brand and go, okay, cool, what can they potentially ask me? What difficult questions can they ask me? There's really good examples of brands in the past that have made massive mistakes, okay? Like really, really big mistakes. But guess what? They owned up to it. They pulled every single product from their racks. They were transparent in their whole process. They put out new product. Yes, it was quite expensive for them at the time, but guess what? Like they're very well established brands now, and then you get the opposite. You get brands that try and hide things, that are not transparent in why certain things happen or why certain things are happening and how they're fixing it. And if you're not transparent, guess what? I'm not going to trust you. And once my trust in a brand is broken, I'm gone. Okay? There's only 5 times in your life that you can actively persuade someone to change brands without a brand breaking their trust. And that is once I leave school. So once I move out of my parents' house, once I start studying, okay, new friends, influencers, once I have my first job, again, new people I work with, once I move in with my partner or get married, and lastly, when you have children. That is the 5 times in your life that you can actively persuade people to change brands without a brand having broken their trust. Any other time, we are not so open. So this is a really difficult job to do. Okay, advertising is a really difficult job to persuade people to change from one brand to the next. Logically, we understand that we need to do it. Emotionally, we won't. Okay, it's not that easy. Oopsie. So you need to be open and honest. You need to consider all sides, anything that people might throw at you, and be transparent. Own up to your mistakes if you've made them. Use an approach that resonates with listeners. So consider the target audience, consider the tone of that station, consider the existing listener base that you have at your disposal. Okay. Does this make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does.
I feel like a preacher. Okay, give me 10 seconds. I'm just quickly fetching my laptop charger because my laptop says it's going to sleep soon if I don't plug it in. Okay, so
Okay.
I'll be back now. Yo, can I just tell you, I have a pinched nerve and like my arm is killing me. Just my 2 seconds of moaning quickly. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to chat about collaborating with other media. So before I show you this, if I were just to ask you what owned media means, what is owned media? My dog is coming in. He wants to say hi. What do you think is owned media? Or not? Have I stumped you?
Is it is it not I don't know, should I say companies that own, like, that have complete control over the platforms?
Isn't that like our Prime Media?
Yeah,
No.
What
Yeah.
media platforms do you own personally?
For personally as Janelle, or
Personally as Daneo.
Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, so there we go. Owned media.
Oh.
Okay, owned media is media platforms that I own. So I'm glad you brought up social media, because for this exercise and for your assignment, owned media includes social media accounts. But in actual real life scenarios, oh, sorry, there's a hair in my eye. Owned media, do we really own our Facebook account and our Twitter account and our Instagram and our TikTok accounts? What happens if Meta decides tomorrow to shut down Facebook? It won't exist anymore.
Yeah. But would companies, and so don't people, or don't some companies pay to be on Facebook?
No.
They don't.
That-
So they wouldn't have legal recourse to,
No.
in
If
case them
Facebook
shutting it
decides
down.
to close Facebook tomorrow, they own Facebook. Or Meta owns it, and they own WhatsApp. They can shut down WhatsApp. They can shut down Twitter or X tomorrow. All of these things we see as owned media because we control the content that we put out on it, which is why in this case it's seen as owned media. But keep in the back of your mind that social media accounts are technically not owned media because they can decide tomorrow to shut it down. But what do we actually own? We own our websites. We own apps. A radio station owns the content that's on that station. Anything else that's affiliated with you, right? You own. Okay, I'm just making you aware that we're looking at owned media in the sense that you do own social media, but you need to realize technically we don't. None of us own it. We can post things for free. In fact, we make money out of it by getting advertisers to post on our platforms, which technically we don't own. Interesting, hey, if you look at it like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not here to confuse you. I'm just here to teach you. So it's just about opening up your mind and thinking about the stuff. If we do look at what you do own, though, if you are a radio station, in this case, you own your website space. We're saying your social media accounts. Your social media accounts of your talent that work for you. That's an interesting one. If I tell you that you need to post about this specific thing that's happening and you're involved, okay, I'm not talking about now paid me like a branded stuff. I'm talking about station things, station events, station branding. SMS and phone data, I can send you push notifications, direct feedback from my listeners via whichever platforms, pre and post listener feedback data, on the ground activations teams, events capabilities, programmatic buying of generic component of a promotion on your streams, or we call it pre-rolls. Okay, so pre-roll is similar to when you watch YouTube. There's always these stupid ads that we need to watch for a specific amount of seconds before we can skip it, right? So you get skippable and non-skippable ads. We can, on our streaming platforms, we can add an add-on. So we call it a pre-roll, okay, which tends to be non-skippable. So you need to listen to the whole thing before your streaming starts. So we can do that. Stream only, podcasting, video production, and endorsements with and from the talent that they have. This is something that's growing more and more. I see this on a day-to-day basis because I do it on a day-to-day basis. We are buying into using the talent more and more. Yes, like we buy content on the stations also, but then we make use of your presenters to endorse this stuff because we find that we get high impact on the campaigns that we do endorsements on, and high engagement if we pay your presenters additional fees to use their social media accounts. So if we break it down, there are 3 types of communication tools and platforms available to radio station. That's owned media, earned media, and paid media. We just spoke about owned media. So owned media is what I own. So what would be paid media, for instance? What is paid media? Come on, 2 of you work in media. What is paid media?
It's content that gets shared either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all other social media platforms that's paid for by clients. So like sponsored tweets or sponsored
anything that
posts.
is paid for. Whether it's a sponsored tweet, whether it's advertising on Google, whether it's a blog, whether it's an influencer. Influencers also fall under paid media. Okay, so what is earned media then? What's left?
What is that earned media?
Earned media. What is the one thing we strive for through all our campaigns?
Make money off of social media.
I would love to make money off of social media. Getting consumers to buy into my product. And how does that work best? By word of mouth. By getting people you trust to tell you, I have used this product, you should use it.
So would it equate to like a brand loyalty?
Brand ambassadors, pretty much.
Brand ambassadors, okay.
So earned media is you liking a radio station's post, you sharing it, you commenting on that post, you reposting it, you writing a review about it. That's all earned media. It's all part of my reach. Okay, I'm going to chat to you a bit more about it now. So in essence, what we do is we use our owned media accounts. We use paid media where need be in order to gain earned media. Okay, and this point of intersection where owned, and paid media culminate in a comprehensive marketing strategy is what we want. This is what makes a successful marketing campaign. Okay, so maybe I should start just by showing you the this thing. So your assignment says that DJ Jazzy B wants to increase his Twitter account in essence, okay, his amount of followers. It doesn't say that you should only use Twitter. It just says that you need to come up with paid, owned, and earned marketing strategies. Tell me which platforms you're using, why you're using it, how you're using it, the pros and the cons for that thing, okay? Of increasing this person's Twitter followers in essence. So to give you an idea, So we know that, for instance, in this case, DJ Jazzy B's owned media is Twitter, okay, which we're looking at. So if we look at paid, in this case, just digital media, it could be cost per click campaigns like banners, display ads, could be sponsored posts, promoted posts, retargeting strategies, influencer posts where influencers are clearly in brand partnerships. Then we get earned digital media through using these, which is then comment sections of the owned digital media spaces, station and client brand mentions in any type of like digital media, posts, shares, recommendations, mentions, reposts, reviews, okay? So for your assignment, you need to come up with a strategy for all three. So you need to think like a marketer in essence, and think about how you can do that. So now we're going to look at the difference between the three types, okay? So owned media is actually really strong if used correctly. Like I told you earlier, we want to create co-creators for earned media, or for owned media, sorry. So owned media is brand driven, unique to each particular brand. A radio station's brand is anything you can control. Anything you have control over is owned, okay? So in a radio station's case, the shows and the content would be owned media. Music is not owned media. We did not come up with it. We don't own it. It's not owned media. Owned media is also things like websites, microsites, blog sites, websites, social media platforms, like we've said, mobile and mobi sites, apps. So a wider presence gives this radio station a better chance of people seeing it, hearing it, understanding the message. Always remember, once again, how do we take in anything? There are three ways. Visually, by hearing it, or kinesthetic, by touch, by experiencing it in real life. So we want to try and do all three. We want you to see it, to hear it, and to be able to touch it, feel it, see it on the ground. So that we can have more people engage with our station's content. So remember, we spoke about 3 C's earlier, and I said don't get confused, that there's 3 C's in spots, okay? But there are also 3 C's in owned media. So 3 different C's. So the other 3 C's is to create, convert, create, curiosity, convert, okay? These 3 are content, community, and context. Like I've said to you earlier, content is king, context is queen. Community is what brings us all together. We all want to have a sense of community. So how do you do that? If we look at content, the foundations of an owned media strategy are your content channels, the vehicles through which you deliver the content to audiences directly, unmediated by a third party. So you're not involving anyone else, you're doing it via your platform. The most common channels, websites, apps. So the key to a successful content channel is that you have engaging content that is relevant and valuable. We're going to look at what is valuable just now. And that you're using all available data that I have to personalize this experience for you as a user, okay? Community. So while content channels focus on the connection between you and your customer, community emphasizes the connections your customers have with one another. Think about games. Okay, everyone plays games, some sort of a game, online games on their phones and wherever. Most of those games, probably all of those games, I'm not sure, but majority of those games have some kind of platform where you engage with other people you don't know. Okay, but somehow, somewhere, you're engaging with them via your game. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sorry, can you just repeat that one? I don't think I quite grasped it.
Okay, so let's say you play a game. Okay, I'm using the example of games because so many people are playing some sort of a game. When you're playing a game, obviously there's an element that you play on your own, but there's an element where you might play with a stranger, or that there's the capability that you can play with a stranger. Someone you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I'm referring to now in this case of community. Okay, so it's other,
okay.
so whoever they are, but other people that have contact with one another. So it could be online. So like I just mentioned, a virtual kind of community or private social networks. That sounds very sketchy though, but yes. Or offline. It could be in-person gatherings or events. Okay, you can have it direct as a discussion where we're discussing things, or indirect where we're doing peer benchmarking, for instance. Context though. You need some mechanism for turning isolated interactions into a connected experience. This requires the ability to capture data and to turn that data into value for you as a customer. And value doesn't mean money. It means entertainment or whatever you need, whatever you find valuable for you specifically, okay? So that's why there's a lot of these games have loyalty and reward programs where you get discounts on things. Or I remember during lockdown, my brother is an avid mountain climber. Obviously during lockdown, he couldn't do it. So he had this app that he walked in his house and around the, I don't know, the garden up and down. And this app would track the amount of walking that he did. And then it got to points where he got medals. So it would say, congratulations, you've now climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And then they would literally send him a medal, like an actual medal, to say that he's climbed like the amount of steps or whatever for this mountain. Things like that. People buy into stuff like that. People buy into loyalty and reward programs. Anyway, so this kind of programs provides this type of context for B2C companies, while strategic account and relationship management programs do the same for B2B companies. What's the difference? B2B, business to consumer. B2C, business to consumer. B2B, business to business. What is a radio station?
B2C.
Okay, business to consumer. So I have content for my listener. What about my clients?
It's both B2C and B2B.
It's both. Radio stations are kind of like Take-A-Lot. It's both. Okay, B2B and B2C, because I work with my clients, but I also work with for my listeners. So I want my listeners to become my clients, and I want my clients to become my listeners. So a radio station is both B2B and B2C. It falls under both. So we're talking about content, context, and community, and they come together in the owned media strategies of today's most innovative marketers. Okay, these brands engage or create engagement platforms that pulls prospects and customers towards them. So some examples: Sephora, makeup company, they've created their own channels for delivering content, their own communities for building connections, and created a context for capturing data and creating value. How? The building blocks are Sephora's loyalty program, their mobile app, their Beauty Talk community, and Color IQ service. So customers can use Color IQ service to find the best shade of makeup for your skin, access preferences on your profile, see recommended products specifically for you on their app, and discuss tips and techniques with experts and community members through their online community. So you do not need to leave their own media sites to find any information when it comes to makeup and beauty techniques. Okay, you can get it all through them. Another very good example is Vail Resorts. So Vail Resorts, during a very difficult time, a recession period, created an owned media platform which is called Epic Mix to engage skiers for their resorts. So they are literally a ski resort. So this platform that they created, Epic Mix, is kind of like a cross between a social media network and an adventure game. Okay, so I can see everything that I can see from you on a social media point of view, but we also compete. So their tickets have RFID technology in their lift tickets to track your location. Okay, so at all times they can locate you as a skier, but also your friends. Okay, wherever you are on the mountain, and they can track your times on your various runs, and you can earn badges and post photos and send messages and compare times through the Epic Mix mobile app. And in large part, due to this Epic Mix app, Vail Resorts grew in revenue, profitability, and market share through a recession where other companies fell behind. This is just owned media. This is nothing else. This is not paid media or like whatever else. This is like just getting my customers to use my app. That's it. That increased market share. Okay. So community, content, context, important. A couple of other examples. Owned media strategies are of particular interest to companies who want to create direct relationships with the customers. So Nike has Nike Plus running community. Under Armour is developing an owned media strategy around their acquisition of MapMyFitness, and Kraft Foods, aka the mayonnaise and ketchup whatever company, has created an entire community around recipes as a social currency. So we exchange recipes, okay? So there are certain characteristics, fundamental characteristics that these brilliant owned media platforms share, and that is they create value for people beyond their products being sold, value that's not monetary, so value in some other way, entertainment, community, fun, whatever it is, okay? Secondly, they use the data not as a way to target you, to advertise things to you, but as a way to create a service that is more useful for you, something that you want to use. And lastly, they treat people not as a passive consumer, but rather as active co-creators. So you are helping in creating the kind of content that is on this platform because you are engaging in it and providing your opinion on it. Okay. So that is, in a nutshell, owned media. Happiness with me up until now?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to end this for tonight here because my arm is killing me and it's 20 to 8. So next week, Monday, we will conclude earned media and paid media and make sure that you understand everything on your assignment, because technically you should now be able to answer every single question on your assignment. Okay. So do me a favor, start going through it and see if you have any questions so that we can also discuss that next week. But then we'll continue with that and look at executions. Yes. And then that's it for tonight, unless you have any question.
Thank you.
No, none from my
No.
side.
Cool. Have a great evening and chat to you next week, Monday.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Feel better.